Hello everyone, today I'll be narrating 3 new creepyposts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Liking this video and subscribing to my channel helps me a lot. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
This happened to me a few years back when I was in my early 20s. At the time, I worked in a department store and a makeup counter. The job relies heavily on good customer service and building relationships because you want people to keep coming back to spend money on your products. We are given personalized business cards so that we can build up our own client base. Very important for a commission department. It's not uncommon to be familiar with the people who frequently shop in the store. As workers, our training is focused on being friendly and accommodating. One day while I was working, I had to move to a makeup counter that wasn't my own to cover someone's lunch break. It was a really slow day, so I was just leaning on the counter, people watching. I could tell most shoppers were just browsing, so I kept to myself. One of the people that I noticed was a very tall and broad man. He walked very slowly, almost hunched over. His face was fixed very aggressively, like he was angry but focused. He circled around the counter a few times, but I could feel his gaze on me instead of the products. After a few rotations around the department, I decided to greet him in case he needed help. It wasn't until he came directly over me that I realized just how big he actually was. I'm a 4'10" female, so I feel pretty small regardless. But even with his slouched posture, he was over 6 feet tall and well over twice my weight. I'll never forget his teeth. They were completely black in the front. Your eyes couldn't help but go right to them. Despite his menacing appearance, he was soft-spoken. Truthfully, I could tell he wasn't all there by the way he talked. He told me no when I asked if he needed help, but requested my number, so direct. We had never spoken before. I declined and said that I was in a relationship and that it would be inappropriate. He then asked if he could have a business card for the counter in case he wanted to get products. Since I wasn't on my normal counter and I really wanted him to go away, I handed him my coworker's business card and told him to call if he had any questions. It worked and he walked away after that, filling me with relief. Only a couple minutes later, the phone on the counter rings. I answer with my peppy customer service voice and say, "Thank you for calling makeup brand name, how can I help you?" And immediately I know it is the same guy when he starts talking. He asks me again for my personal number and I explain once again that I cannot do that, but he just wants to talk, he explains. Since he wasn't getting the hint, I say, "I should have told you that I'm married, you can't have my number." Politely he apologizes and hangs up. I thought that would be the end of him, but for the next few weeks or so I spent much of my time at work anxious that he would show up. I would see him every week and he would lurk around the counter looking for me. Anytime I would see him, I'd immediately drop what I was going to run and hide or run to the closest customer and offer any bit of assistance to make it look like I was busy so he wouldn't talk to me. I successfully dodged him every time and it came to the point where I stopped seeing him. I was thrilled. I had almost completely forgotten about him until one day I decided to go to Walmart by myself to pick up a few things on my day off. I generally like to shop alone. I can take all the time I need and I like leisurely looking around. I grabbed a basket and made my way over to the cosmetic/hair wellness section since that's where most of the things I needed were. I only managed to grab a few things before I locked eyes with him as I walked by the supplement aisle. I had recently changed my hair color and wasn't wearing my work uniform, so I didn't think he'd realize who I was. I was ready to just go about my shopping and ignore him until I noticed that he dropped the items he had in his hand and started heading my way. I panicked and stiffened my pace immediately. I thought to myself, he's not going to really follow you through the store, right? But as I turned around to look, I could see his humongous body just plowing through people, with that same terrifying look on his face, only meaner. His black teeth growing closer with a snarl. Since the direction I was walking was the opposite of the exit, and there was no way I was going to turn around, I decided that my best course of action would be to follow the perimeter of the store and cut down the center section, which would bring me close to the registers. I speed walked the entire time in the hopes of losing him amongst all the people, but never once turning around again. By the time I made it to the register area, I could actually feel him behind me. Still not wanting to turn around to look, I glanced in the reflection of the soda machines that are in between the register aisles to see how close he was. To my horror, there was only about 2 feet between us. I was afraid to just drop my stuff and run out the door in case he followed me to my car. I parked in the far back at the parking lot and didn't want to risk it. I also didn't want to get in line at the registers since the lines were long and I would just be standing out in the open alone. Instead, I walked into the cluster of people crowded around the self-checkout line. I noticed another large but older gentleman with his carriage in the middle and ran straight for him. The people were so closely clustered together that the man following me couldn't make it through. I ran over to the man in line and grabbed onto his carriage. I said, "I'm so sorry, I'm not cutting you, but there's a man that's been following me through half the store and I need to stand with you." He was so sweet and let me be with him while we waited in line and even let me go ahead of him so I could leave quicker. As I was cashing out, I could see in my peripheral vision my stalker staring at me and pacing about, but he couldn't come near me since the self-checkout is somewhat sectioned off. By the time I had finished and grabbed my receipt, I couldn't see him anymore. I looked around but he was nowhere. I thought about asking the older man to walk me to my car, but he still wasn't finished at his register, so I decided to call my boyfriend and make a run for it. Staying on the phone, I explained to him what was going on as I sprinted to my car, frantically looking around in case he tried to follow me outside. I made it to my car safely and rushed right home, breaking down to my parents about what just happened. I could feel it in my bones that the man wanted to do something to me, and thankfully I didn't find out what that was. His aggressive aura was bad. To this day, I could still remember the adrenaline that I felt when he followed me. I had never felt so vulnerable. I quit that job roughly 2 years later. This incident happened in the summer of 2015. I lived by myself in a nice house inside a small town. Low crime, but still the occasional shady person. Anyway, at work that day on a smoke break, I watched a dog get thrown from a moving vehicle, 4-lane city traffic during the start of rush hour. I ran right out there, scooped his little self up, and booked it back to my workplace. He was not injured, amazingly. As a bleeding heart animal lover, I decided to take him home with me until I could figure out what to do with him. I have a large amount of cats, and always have. This was my first experience with a dog that I was solely responsible for. This guy was very shy, head hung, tail tucked, jumpy, just looking at me like I was about to beat him. I was clueless on the subject of dog personalities and tendencies. I just knew that they needed to be taken out frequently. His first night with me, we had been out about 15 times, as I did not want him using the bathroom in my house, obviously. I was having my final cigarette of the day on my porch. The dog was on a lead, chilling under my chair as I smoked and chilled. I see a man walking on the sidewalk that runs by my house. He kept glancing up at me before passing. Shortly after he passed my house, he stopped, turned on his heel and approached. "Hey, can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" he asked. I told him I would search the address on my phone, which, of course, was taking a minute to pull up. He explained he didn't have a phone of his own and was attempting to get to a friend's house, taking small steps toward me the whole time. Finally, the address I summoned came up. "It's exactly 2 blocks north of here, right on the southwest corner of the cross street," I told him, pointing in the direction. He kept his eyes locked on me, continuing to slowly move closer. The dog starts growling very softly at this point. I forgot he was even there until now. "Mind if I take a look at the map?" He grinned sheepishly. "I'm bad with directions." I rose from my seat, pointing again. "It's truly just 2 blocks up the road. Just follow the road. 2 blocks. The house will be on your left," making it very clear that I wasn't going to just hand him my phone. "Well, can I call them? I need to let them know I'm coming," he said, still creeping closer, extending his hand. "No," I curtly replied. "How about text them?" Pushing forward still. "Dude, no." I started toward my door. "Just let me see your phone." He was visibly becoming pissed off, clearly trying to contain it and getting way too close to my porch. As a last-ditch effort of getting this dude to screw off, I say, "You need to get out of my yard. My dog's protective. He will screw you up." I didn't know the first thing about this dog, let alone whether he had the capacity to screw someone up. I just hoped saying would intimidate pushy phone guy. Like I had said the magic words, Pupper springs into action. The dog emerges like a bullet from under the chair, growling, snarling, and barking his head off. He jerks me near off the porch trying to get at this guy. He sounded and acted like an 80-pound attack dog, not a 40-pound timid beagle mix. I was afraid. I didn't know if the pup would turn on me. As stated previously, at the time I knew absolutely jack nothing about dogs. He backed his hindquarters into my legs, almost nudging me to the door. Still carrying on, eyes locked on phone dude and baring his teeth. Phone dude holds up his hands and backs off, stammers something like, 2 blocks north, yeah? And begins walking that way. I go inside, cut off my light lights and peek out the window at him. He glances at my house, assured I'm inside, turns and begins walking the completely opposite direction I pointed him in. Icing on the cake, he pulls a phone from his pocket and raises it to his ear to make a call. The dog secured his place as a member of the family that night. He is incredibly protective of me and has frightened away another creeper since this incident. He is attached at my hip and has made it known that he is grateful to be in a safe, loving home, wherein he will never again become a projectile from a moving vehicle. His name is Hank, and I truly believe that night would have ended very poorly for me had he not been there. So about 3 years ago, I was going to school in a US city and was living with 2 other roommates. My one roommate was known to usually bring seedy characters back to the apartment. At one point during our fall semester, she befriended a guy in her advertising class who went by the name of Dallas. He became her weed dealer and she would frequently bring him over to the apartment. I suspected they were sleeping together, but she denied it. It was a strange relationship, but who am I to judge? My other roommate and I thought he was charismatic enough, but also didn't see the appeal that Christy, my roommate who befriended him, saw. I remember one night we had Dallas over for dinner. He told us how he played for our college's football team, that he just started his own business at the age of 25, and how he was a very well-known weed dealer who made a lot of money, and his name was Dallas because he used to live in Dallas, Texas, and his parents named him after that. Me and my other roommate nodded our heads and listened, but we didn't think much of it except for this dude thought he was hot stuff and wanted to gloat about himself. I believe he came over for dinner or something maybe 1 or 2 other times. My roommate claimed that one time she decided to buy weed from him and went to his apartment off campus. When she arrived, she saw our roommate, Christy, just passed out on a chair in the middle of the day in Dallas's apartment in some random room. When my roommate arrived, he mentioned nothing of her being there. My roommate shook her awake and Christy just woke up in a haze and basically told my roommate to screw off. My roommate recounted the story to me and we both agreed it was weird and Dallas was probably not the safest person to hang with. After a couple of months, Christy stopped hanging with him. I remember her saying he got pissed she didn't want to sleep with him. I also found out that a friend of hers, who knew him for a long time, was engaged to him. Oh, also, his real name wasn't Dallas. Yeah, real shocker there. Fast forward 2 years. Me nor my roommate talk to Christy anymore. We are living elsewhere in said city doing our own thing. We get an alert on our phones that a girl who had just transferred to our college went missing after leaving from one of the campus bars the previous night. It doesn't take long, maybe a few days, when this huge story breaks. This girl was killed by someone she left the bar with that night. My roommate calls me and goes, "Do you remember what Dallas's real name was?" I go, "Yeah, I believe it was said name." She goes, "Go online and read this article. He killed that girl who just went missing." Sure enough, I go online and there's the most horrifying mugshot of Dallas with a photo of the girl he had just slain. It gets crazier. Apparently he had taken her home that night and attempted a one-night stand, and he killed her by blunt force and strangulation. If that isn't terrible enough, he cleaned up the evidence-ish in his apartment, threw her body in a storage container, took a lift to his grandma's house hours away, and buried the storage container with her remains in it on the property somewhere. After obtaining a video of the two of them leaving together from the bar, it didn't take cops long to bust him. Weeks after the story broke, so many girls came forward and shared similar creepy stories about Dallas, the guy who played for said college's football and ran a successful business. You can guess that none of this was ever true. Also, he was like 28 years old, claiming he was still a student at our college when this happened, prying on younger women. I just hope he rots in prison for the rest of his life. Alright, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.